So my name is Sadie. I work for the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust. I am their education officer, and also alongside doing that, help to manage the community aspect of Whale Track, which I will talk to you a little bit about in a moment, which is what this training course is a part of. So what we are going to do tonight is we're going to have a look at, we're going to have a little introduction as to who the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust are, and also what Whale Track is, in case anyone here is new to us, just to give you a brief intro as to who we are. We will also then be going into the main area of the talk, which is what to look out for. So we'll be covering signs and cues for you to look out for to help you try and spot different whales and dolphins. We will then move on to the identifying features that you can look out for to try and help you work out what it is exactly you are seeing. We'll then move on to the behaviors of those animals, which is another way to help you work out what it is you're seeing, but also a good way to help you watch them for longer if you kind of know what to expect from them. And then we'll go into a little bit of cetacean species ID and do a little quiz. And if we've got time, I may have been a bit too optimistic, but if we've got time, we'll also go on to other marine animals as well. But we'll cover the whales and dolphins at the start and see where we get to. I will say, if you have, like I say, any comments or any questions or anything you want to add, if there's any top tips that you want to add, please do put them in the chat. I've got the chat box open so I can see any messages that you send me throughout the session. Okay, so HWDT, the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust, we are a marine conservation charity that is based in Tobermory on the Isle of Mull, and we were established in 1994. So we've been around for a wee while now, and our goal is for whales, dolphins and porpoises to be protected, but also valued throughout the Hebrides. And we do this in different ways. We've got different outputs that allow us to achieve this, things like our education and outreach programs. So we go into schools, we talk to local communities, and we run events. And we also have our visitor centre in Tobermory. We also do the science aspect as well. One way is through Silurian. So we run research expeditions throughout the summer, and we have volunteers come on board to learn all about being a marine mammal scientist, and they really help us collect this information and spend anywhere between 7 and 12 days on the boat collecting the data with us. So that's a fantastic opportunity for both sides. And we also do it through Whale Track, which is our community sightings database. So this is Whale Track. So I really do like to encourage people, if they ever see a whale or a dolphin or a porpoise or even a basking shark, to send their sighting into us. And you can do this either through the website. You can go on to whaletrack.hwdt.org to send in your sightings, or you can download the app and send in your sightings that way. You can do things like doing an excursion, which is an effort-based survey, or you can also watch from land, which again is doing a effort-based survey where you are spending a dedicated amount of time watching the sea and reporting what you see or even what you don't see. It's just as important letting us know if there's nothing in that area at that specific time. Or if you just happen to come across a whale or a dolphin on your walks, or as you're on the ferry crossing from one place to another, you can just let us know of that as well. So all this information helps us to better understand the species that are in the Hebrides and around the west coast of Scotland. It helps us to influence decision making and policy, because we have a much better understanding of the distribution and the relative abundance of the species that are in the area. It helps us to track their movements as well and know which areas are important areas for these animals for different behaviours that they might start to show us. So we might see that there's certain areas that are good for feeding, or certain areas where they may go to for courtship or for breeding. So all of this information helps us have a better understanding so we can better protect them. So one of the outputs that I wanted for tonight was to give you some ideas of good land-based sites to watch for whales and dolphins. And this is a really good resource. If you've not heard of it before, it is our whale trail. So there is a website called whaletrail.org that you can go on, and this map is on that website. And this gives you lots of land-based places that you can watch from that are good locations to look out for whales and dolphins or for other marine species, but also just to explore around the West Coast as well. The website will give you lots of information about accessibility, about parking, what else is around that area for you to look at, whether there's a cafe, which is always nice, but also what species you might see in those areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a resource throughout the talk tonight. As we speak about different species, we're going to look at a heat map for where sightings have come in for those species, and then also link that into potentially the locations you could go to through Whale Trail to maybe go and see those species. So it's never guaranteed, but they're just kind of recommended places that we're going to talk about. We're also going to cover a little bit about being responsible when you watch for animals. So some people go and watch from land, but some people are lucky enough to maybe own their own boat or go out and do surveys on guided boat trips. So one of the things that I always like to bring up as well is how you can be responsible watching for these animals, because one thing, it makes it good, it makes it a better experience for the animal themselves. They're not being disturbed while you're watching them, but it makes it a better experience for you as well, because potentially that animal will stay around longer because it is not being disturbed. So if you are ever on a boat, being aware of the WISE scheme is a really good thing, because this is the UK's national training scheme for minimising disturbance to marine wildlife. Organisations and boat operators can attend the training to learn more about the different species they might encounter, but also learn more about how they should manage and handle their boat when they are around these animals, things that they can do to limit their impact on the animal and potentially mean that they get a much better sighting of that animal as well. It is based off of the Nature Scots Code of Conduct for wildlife watching. So they have a wildlife watching code, which provides a standard for industry and helps us all stay within the law for when we are watching wildlife, and it helps us make sure we're minimising our disturbance to them. So these are both things that is a good thing to be aware of if you're going out watching for wildlife, especially if you're going out on the water. But this wildlife watching code also covers if you're watching from land as well, so it covers more than just marine animals. It covers things such as birds as well. And this is all to minimise disturbance. So what I mean by disturbance is a change in the animal's behaviour or its environment, which could impact on its health or its survival in the short, medium or the long term. So short term could be getting actual injuries on their bodies, and that could be a short term, quite severe disturbance to them. Or you could have the long term impact where it's a constant, maybe low level disturbance over a long period of time, which is building up their stress levels or potentially impacting on a population as a whole. If we're impacting on one individual, it could actually impact on that population as a whole, especially if it's quite a small population to begin with. So things such as, like I say, injuries themselves, but it could have a impact on things that we don't necessarily see, such as change in their distribution, which may not always be obvious to start off with, disruption of their feeding or their communication between each other, excessive energy use. So if you're scaring them out of one area, then potentially they're using up more energy. So they'll actually then deteriorate in their condition potentially if they're especially not feeding as well as they could be, and it just increases their vulnerability. So these are things that we are trying to avoid. So I will also say, if you ever think you are witnessing a act of disturbance, it is a wildlife crime, so please do report it to the wildlife crime officer through the 101 number for the police. Okay, so let's talk about the animals that we see in our waters around the Hebrides. So we get lots of different species. around the Hebrides. We actually get 1/4 of the world's cetaceans have been recorded in Scotland. So how many do you think we have seen? How many different species of whales, dolphins and porpoises do you think we have recorded in Scottish waters around the Hebrides? So I've got options on the screen. We've got 8, 24 or 30. What do we think? Oh, Colin says B. Jan says B. So 24. Bethany says 30. Any more guesses before I answer? Oh, brilliant. More Bs. 24. Excellent. Yes. So you would be right. Yes, 24 different species of cetacean have been recorded. Now, this does include, unfortunately, dead species as well. So if an animal, if a species washes up on the shore and it is dead, we will also record that as a species having been sighted in our waters. It's just what we do as scientists. But that is 1/4 of the world's cetacean species that have been seen. So that is pretty incredible that we have so many animals here. And it's because we've got such a diverse habitat. So these are going to be the species that I actually talk about and focus on this evening. So 7 different species in 3 different groups. So we've got porpoise, we've got some dolphins, and we've got some baleen whales as well. And we're going to look at how we can identify them, including their behaviors, like I mentioned earlier, and then the areas that you could potentially see them. So we're going to start off with the wee harbour porpoise, and then we'll have the bottlenose dolphin, common dolphin, white-beaked dolphin, Rizzo's, killer whale, and the Minke Whale. So they'll be the ones that we will get through this evening. So before we move on to those, we're going to have a look at what we should be looking for. So the signs and cues that will help you hopefully spot these animals if they are around the area that you're watching from. So the first sign or cue is splashes. So watching the water and you see some splashes. So I am now just picturing myself up at a site watching the sea and I see a splash out of the corner of my eye. This could be a range of different things. It could be something such as a wave crashing over a bit of land that you maybe haven't seen. This is something that we spotted the other day. Someone wondered if it was potentially a whale or a dolphin, but as we looked for longer, it was actually a wave crashing. Or it could be that there have been birds diving and they have created that splash. But it could also be that you've missed a whale or a dolphin breaching and they have then caused a splash. So that could potentially be a good sign. So if you ever see any sort of disturbance like splashes in the water, keep your eyes on that because there might be something around. Sorry, I'm just checking the question. Generally speaking, how far does the body of a dead cetacean travel before washing up on a beach and therefore make it a valid count to include it as a species? That's a really good question. That is a question I will have to ask our science officer. I will make a note of that, Jane, and find out for you because that is a very valid question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's just interesting thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Sadie.
No worries. So moving on from the splashes, because I mentioned birds, other wildlife. So other wildlife are a really good thing to look out for if you're looking for whales and dolphins, in particular birds. I always tell people birds are your friends if you're looking for whales and dolphins, especially feeding birds. They're the ones that you want to look out for. I generally will keep an eye on gannets, especially. I have watched gannets flying around in a circle, diving down for their food. And then as I'm watching them, I see a fin come up in amongst them all. So if there are diving birds, you know there's food around. And if there's food around, you know there's potentially whales or dolphins around. So when I was watching those gannets, it was actually Minke whales that was in amongst them. So there was one Minke whale swimming around in amongst the birds diving. So yeah, it could it could very well be that that it's just birds, but whenever I see a large flock of birds feeding, I get very excited and keep an eye on them. I've also witnessed birds following dolphins. So there's been bottlenose dolphins feeding, and actually the birds, and I think these were just gulls at the time, they're following the dolphins because they're hoping to get scraps of fish from them. So if you kind of see the birds behaving slightly differently than you would expect, potentially looking like they're following something, they could potentially be following feeding dolphins. So connected to the splashes is another form of water movement. So this is a picture of what we call a footprint. So this is what happens when a whale or a dolphin has kind of come up to the surface, or they've breached, or they've surfaced in such a way that they've kind of just broken the water's surface, dived back down, and they've left this kind of footprint in the water. So you can see from this water, there's still ripply bits of water around, then this really calm sort of patch of water that looks out of place. So if you see that, potentially an animal has broken the surface of the water in some way, and then they've returned under the water. So this is a really good thing to keep an eye on. There's potentially going to be something there. So have a scan around the vicinity of that footprint and see if you can spot anything surfacing. Then we're getting on to the actual animals showing themselves a little bit more. So this is reflection. So this is when it's quite light out and there's quite a bright sunshine out, which is really nice to have, but also the sea is quite calm as well, and you can see this reflection in the water. So this is when you kind of see this glare, this reflection sparkling, and it's because the sun is reflecting off of the wet body of an animal. So in this picture, this is a little reflection of the sun on the back of a porpoise. And again, there have been occasions where I've not seen the animal, but I've seen this sort of light, this sort of reflection, and then I've looked in that direction and there have been a few animals surfacing. So if you see something like that out at sea, have a look in that area and see if it's actually the sun is reflecting off the body of an animal. Then we've got head. So this is of a seal, and if we get time, I'll cover seals at the end, but you may also see potentially the head of a dolphin. They might be spy hopping, so it's always good to have a look at the different behaviors that you might see, but you may also just see the head of a seal poking out, which is always nice as well to witness. And then we've got the animal being really helpful and actually showing its whole back and its dorsal fin. And then you know, okay, I've seen something, there's definitely an animal there. I've just seen its back, I've just seen the dorsal fin. So then you're moving on to trying to work out what it is you are seeing. So this is where we go to the ID of these animals. So I'm going to just talk through some of the things that you would look at to help you narrow down what it is you are looking at. So you'd first look at the size and the shape of the animal. So how big it is, I guess, in comparison to other animals that potentially are around, like the birds behind them, and also the shape of their body, especially if it's jumping out of the water, you can really see the shape of its body. So this one is a Minke Whale. You can see that nice long back, and then you've got the dorsal fin, which is closer to its tail. So with the dorsal fins, you would be looking at the shape and the size and the location. So generally speaking, for a whale, the dorsal fin is closer to the tail. For a dolphin, generally they're in the middle of their body. There's always a few that break the rule, but generally they're in the middle of their body. And then you're looking at the size and the shape of that fin to be able to work out what it is. Then again, you'll look at the general shape of the animal, but also the head and the beak are really helpful to look at, especially when it comes to things like dolphins. Working out what the species of the dolphin is really handy by looking at their face shape, their head shape. So things like the Rizzo's dolphin generally don't have a beak, they have a very flat face. I always say it looks like they've swum into a brick wall and their face is just flattened, but they still have a smile. So looking at things like that is always helpful to work out what you're seeing. Then the coloration of the animal, especially if they're breaching out of the water, like this dolphin is here, looking at the coloration or any markings or patterns that they might have on their body. So things like the common dolphin in this picture has that sort of yellow shape at the start, at the front of their body, and then it goes into a grey patch at the back of their body. So we'll have a look at different colorations of animals in a little while. Blows are quite hard, I will admit. I've put it on here, but I'm actually really bad at IDing an animal through its blow. You've got to be quite good to be able to work that out. But it will help you work out potentially if you're watching a dolphin, a porpoise, or a whale at least. Generally, it's whales that you'll see the blows for. They're usually a lot bigger, a lot bushier. Things like the humpback, like in this picture, which I won't be covering tonight, but things like the humpback, their blow is described as being quite bushy, and it can be really tall, apparently up to 4 meters tall. So if you see this really tall bushy blow, potentially what you're seeing is a humpback. Whereas things like the wee harbour porpoise, it's not usually visible, but you can normally hear it. So if you're close enough, you might actually be able to hear it, because their nickname is the puffing pig. So that helps to at least give you a little bit of an idea of what you might be seeing or hearing. And then their behavior, which I will talk more about in just a second. So there's other things that you can think about as well when you're trying to work out what it is you're seeing. The group size, so the number of individuals in the group that you're watching will help you narrow down what it is you're seeing. The area that you're in. And looking at things like whale track is really handy for that, because you can actually look to see what has been seen in that area before. So it might help you work out, okay, what has been here before? So what potentially is it that I'm seeing? And then also the season, because some of these animals are migratory, so are only seen generally during the summer months. And then some of them you can actually see all year round. So working out, okay, what time of year it is, where am I, how many are there? And then working through these things will help you work out what it is you're spotting. So having all of this information helps you work out what species it is, and then knowing what species it is and going on to the behaviors of that species will hopefully help you have a good encounter with them, because you'll kind of know what to expect a little bit more from when you're watching them. So going on to the behaviors, we've got things like breaching, very much one that people get quite excited about because they're fully out of the water and they're showing themselves off a little bit more. Breaching is when their whole body is out of the water and they re-enter it from their side or their back or their front. So it is quite similar to leaping. Leaping is generally when they re-enter the water face first. So dolphins are usually the animals that you see displaying this type of behavior. You generally won't see things like harbour porpoise breaching or leaping out of the water. They're a lot calmer, don't really show off as much as the dolphins do. Then fast swim, so this is a regular behavior seen by species such as the common dolphin. So this is when they display a short burst of accelerated swimming. It's kind of a form of travel as well, so they look like they are going somewhere. So fast swim is a good one to look out for as well, to kind of see how fast they're swimming and what direction. And then again, you can see in this picture the group size as well. Logging, this is a behavior where they're floating on the surface. It's usually connected to when the animal is resting. So cetaceans are mammals, so they do need to breathe. They need to come to the surface to breathe, and they need to rest. So logging is one of their resting behaviors. They can rest. Now this is one of the facts that I love. When they sleep, they do sleep with half of their brain, so they'll shut down half their brain and keep one half active. So you will also see things like them swimming just really slowly and then generally coming up to the surface quite periodically. That's them potentially resting or sleeping, but they need to constantly come up to breathe. Or like I say, you'll have them logging where they're just kind of sitting at the surface and just taking a moment to breathe and to rest and conserve their energy. Then we've got bottling. Again, this one's more associated with seals. This is another form of rest behavior for the seals. They do something similar to the dolphins by shutting down half their brain, but the seals will, if they want to rest in the water, generally you'll see them just with their head kind of poking all the way up, and they're just kind of floating in the water a bit like a bottle does. Then we've got feeding behavior. So we've got feeding, but we've also got things like foraging. Foraging is when we think that they are hunting for food, but we haven't necessarily seen them make a catch. Whereas feeding, you'll see things like with the baleen whales, them lunge feeding. So this is where they have kind of in this picture, come out of the water, face first, mouth wide open, and they've just taken a gulp full of fish and water as well. So that would be the sort of behavior you would see from a whale. From a dolphin, you may see them actually throwing the fish in the air. So they need to swallow the fish head first. So you may see dolphins throwing the fish in the air and trying to catch them head first in order to feed. Bowel riding, this is a behavior generally associated with dolphins. So especially things like common dolphins and bottlenose dolphins are known for bowel riding. So if you have got a species that are interacting with the boat and bowel riding at the front of the boat where they're surfing the wave really, then you most likely got a dolphin following you. So then it's working out which species of dolphin it is. Then we've got social or sexual behavior. So social behavior would be things such as the dolphins interacting with each other. They could be jumping around together. Dolphins generally will go belly to belly if there is any sexual behavior being displayed. And basking sharks, which is what you can see in this picture, is when they're more nose to tail. So that is courtship behavior. So that is always something to be aware of if you're watching for marine animals, to be aware especially of these behaviors, because this is a very important life process for them. And then finally, some other really cool behaviors to see is things like tail slapping. Again, this is generally seen in dolphins. This is where they have brought their tail out of the water and they're slapping it down onto the surface. It's not fully understood exactly what they're doing this for. It could be a form of females, mother dolphins, disciplining the children. They're young, or it could be a form of communication or even hunting. So some dolphins will actually tail slap to startle fish, and then it helps them in hunting and catching the fish. So there's different theories and thoughts behind why this behavior is displayed. Okay, so now we've gone through kind of what to look for to be able to spot these animals and the behavior to be able to work out what these animals are. We are going to go through a little bit of species ID and places that you can hopefully go to try and spot these animals as well. So we're going to start off with this animal. So you can pop it in the chat. What species do you think this animal is? This isn't the species quiz. We have got a quiz at the end, but I just thought instead of me talking all the time, I want to give you guys a chance to chip in. So what species do we think we've got here? So Shona thinks a dolphin. Harbour porpoise, nice. Okay, any other guesses? Oh, another harbour porpoise guess. Okay, so it is a harbour porpoise. Yes, brilliant, well done. So this is a harbour porpoise. So the way that you can tell it was a porpoise is of its body shape and its fin shape in particular. So they are our smallest cetacean that we see in the UK and in Scotland. They only grow to just under 2 meters. So that still sounds really big, but compared to all of the others, they're quite a small animal, but they are quite stocky. They've got this kind of stocky, robust body looking, and they've got quite no beak. Their head kind of just goes into their mouth. They haven't got this sort of beak shape that we'll talk about later with some of the dolphins, but their dorsal fin is in the middle of their back, and it is kind of a small triangular shape, like you can see there. There's not really that much of a curve, and it's not really prominent either. It's kind of short and triangular in the middle of their back. They're a grey colour, got a little bit of paler grey on the top of their body nearer their head, and then a lighter underbelly. Now, these animals are coastal, so you will generally see them in shallower waters because of they feed on the sea floor. And you can see them all year round as well. So they're not migratory, you'll see them all year round. So this is a map. Now the heat maps are based on our data collected through Silurian. There will be a few other maps that are from community sightings data, but we've got heat maps for the sightings from Silurian. So you can see here that generally you can see them in most places around the coast. So they're a really good one to keep an eye out. They're the most sighted species alongside the common dolphin. They're generally the top two species that are seen the most around Scotland. They're also part of a key aspect of our work on Silurian, because we will collect acoustic monitoring data for this species. They create clicks and buzzing and quite high-pitched sounds that you can't pick up with the human ear. So we have a hydrophone which helps us to pick these up. Their distribution overlaps with areas of the coast that are quite heavily used by people. So they will get exposed to high levels of, say, shipping traffic or coastal development. And so keeping an eye on kind of what's happening underwater and picking things up through the hydrophone helps us just to monitor the impact that these may be having on these species. So I've just highlighted some of the places you might want to go based on our whale trail and based on this map for harbour porpoise. But like I say, most times that you're near the sea, you may well see them, or most times that you might be on a boat, you may well see them. But places like Gairloch has quite a heavy, so red is when you when there's been more sightings of this animal. So places like Gairloch or Kinloch on the Isle of Rum, that looks like they're surrounded by harbour porpoise there. Ardnamurchan Lighthouse, I will say, is one of my favourite places. I've only been there twice, but I absolutely love it. I've had such good sightings both times that I've been there. And then the OA around Isla as well, there looks to be quite a few animals sighted in that area. So we're going to look at a video and just talk a little bit more about the behaviours that you might see. So these animals, like I say, can be seen all year round. Generally, you want calm waters to be able to see these animals. They are very small. They generally only surface, like you can see in the video here. Their surfacing profile is kind of like a rolling tire. So they'll come to the surface, showing that, I'll play that again, showing that little dorsal fin, and they just do this rolling motion in the water. Typically, you'll see them in quite small groups. Sometimes on their own, sometimes in groups of maybe 3 or 4. I saw a little pod of 6 the other day, but generally they're in small groups. They're not in really large groups. And their diving pattern when they're feeding, commonly they will surface to breathe about 4 times every 10 to 20 seconds before they dive for about 6 minutes. So it's good to have an idea of kind of their diving profile, so that if you lose track of them, you might know how long it will take for them to come back up. Like I said earlier, they feed on the seafloor, so they'll feed on things like sand eels, and they can actually also amazingly catch 550 small fish per hour, and that is what they need to catch in order to kind of keep up their energy reserves. And they have a 90% success rate for their hunting, so it's pretty incredible. Okay, our next species, does anyone know which one this is? We've had a couple of these pictures for this species already. Oh, brilliant, well done. Common dolphins, yes. Excellent, yes. So these are common dolphins, fantastic. These are also very, very regularly seen around the West Coast. So these animals are bigger than the harbour porpoise. They can grow to about 2.5 meters in size, and they are coastal but also offshore species. So you can see them from land, but if you are out on the boats, they may be the animal that decides to bow ride off of your boat. Like I said earlier, they have that creamy yellow pattern. It's kind of like an hourglass pattern on the side of their body, but they've got a nice kind of curved dorsal fin in the middle of their body there. So it's quite clearly different than the harbour porpoise dorsal fin. It's a lot more curved and pointed. With their blow, so I've mentioned, like, this is one of the things to look out for. Generally it's not seen, but these animals will normally make quite a lot of splashing. They are quite active in the water, so you'll see from the surfacing profile in that picture there, they will be jumping out of the water or leaping out of the water. They are very active animals. This is a comparative map of sightings. So this is one of the things that we've been learning about this animal through community sightings that have been sent in to us. They are usually, or they are classed as migratory. They are usually seen in the summer months. However, in recent years, they have been seen all year round. And their distribution is also changing as well. So in the last 15 years, we've started seeing them further north. So you can see that there's a lot more of them being seen further north than from the map that shows 2003 to 2005. So this could be as a result of things like climate change. These are warm water species. So potentially because of our seas warming, they're actually able to head further north. So the impact this may have on more cold water species is still to be determined, but it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. So some places you could go to potentially see these animals, places like Clactol further north, lovely beach as well. Kilt Rock on the Isle of Skye, there's been a few sighted around there from this map. And I won't try and pronounce that because some of these places I can't pronounce, but on the Isle of Cole, you could potentially go and see them as well. There's been quite a few seen there, or even opposite that at Ardnamurchan. Like I said, the other day I was at Ardnamurchan, we saw hundreds of common dolphins throughout the entire time we were there. No matter where you looked, the sea just had common dolphins. So yeah, keeping your eyes out on that kind of bubbling sort of motion of lots of common dolphins swimming around and breaking the surface. It's a really good spot for them. So could the increase in numbers be due to more sightings generally, more data submitted, or was this trend not seen in other species? That's a really good question. So it could very well have an impact, the fact that more people are watching and more sightings are coming in. Or was the trend not seen in other species? So yeah, it is something that has definitely been more obvious, I guess, with common dolphins. It's something that throughout throughout a 15-year period that they've been getting seen more year round, and not just in the summer months, but also being seen more in the north. So it started off with anecdotal comments from people saying, oh, we're seeing common dolphins a lot more around places like Ullapool, whereas they never used to see them as much. And then as the sightings started to prove and started to show, they were actually being seen more and more in further north. So yeah, it could be that there is an impact on the fact that there are more sightings coming in, but from what we have seen from the data and from anecdotal comments from people who have lived in these areas for a long time, this does appear to be a change in their distribution. We're seeing many more in the southwest of England too. Maybe an indication of the health of our seas, maybe. Potentially, hopefully it is an indication that our seas are healthy. But yeah, I think it's something that whenever things like distribution or behaviors of animals change, it's definitely something to keep an eye on and try and get as much information as possible to try and understand the cause of it. So like I say, we don't know what is causing it. Our theory is potentially could have something to do with our seas warming, but it is definitely something that we want to keep an eye on and keep getting data in to be able to work out what is potentially happening. But yeah, that's brilliant that you're seeing more in the southwest of England as well. So we've got a wee video as well of the common dolphins. So these guys, the sounds for this one. I'm going to mute the sound. There we go. So these animals are seen in quite large groups. They can be seen in pods of 30 or hundreds. So like I mentioned the other day, we definitely saw hundreds at Ardnamurchan. You can get things like super pods with common dolphins. They're very active. They do like to bow ride, and they are very fast swimmers. They can swim at excess of 15 miles an hour. So knowing that will help you to maybe keep track of them, keep an eye on them, knowing that actually they could be in one area to start off with, and then when they dive, they could potentially come up in a different area. So to keep an eye on the area around where you spotted them. If you're ever on a boat or close enough to them, you may also hear their high-pitched vocalizations. So you are able to hear those, and they are quite loud to be able to pick up. Okay, on to this species. This one is probably a bit trickier, but I did list them all at the start. So can anyone tell me what they think this species might be? Any thoughts? Oh, brilliant. Oh, well done, Jan. White-beaked. Or Juliet thinking maybe an Atlantic white-sided. Okay, so they are white-beaked dolphins. Yes. So I haven't included Atlantic white-sided because we don't really generally see them that much on the West Coast. There's the odd sighting of them in our whale track database, but generally they're not seen as much, whereas white-beaked are one of our I guess more regularly seen. In saying that, I haven't seen one yet on the West Coast, so I need to get out a bit more. But I'm sure, Jan, you've probably see them a decent amount. So the white-beaked dolphin, I actually know a little less about, I'll be completely honest, but hopefully I'll be able to give you a decent amount of information to work out if you've spotted one. They are, again, quite a robust shaped dolphin. You can kind of see from their body they've got a nice chunky belly and a nice chunky tail stock as well, and they have this short stubby white beak, so that's hence the name. Really gives it away if you're seeing a white-beaked dolphin, if you're seeing that white beak on them. They also have this lovely coloration. They've got white around their tail stock and also coming down past their dorsal fin and on the back of their dorsal fin as well. They've got quite a prominent dorsal fin in the middle of their back, again because they're a dolphin, so it's quite tall and it's quite dark in comparison to the white which is around it on their body. Again, you don't really see the blow from these animals. They are seen in open waters around the Hebrides, generally further north. So these are one of our colder water species. They can also grow to about just under 3 meters. So one of our larger dolphin species as well, but not the largest. So like I say, this map shows that they are generally seen further north. So we've got a little bit of the sightings around South Uist and Barra as well, but generally further north around Lewis. They are deep water and colder water species. So like I mentioned earlier with the common dolphins that are heading further north, potentially because of the warming of our seas, one of the animals that we think it could potentially have an impact on is the white-beaked. So there is some research that suggests that their numbers have declined in recent years, and this could potentially have a correlation with the common dolphin abundance that has actually increased. So this is why we're kind of wanting to keep an eye on this on this information, because it could potentially be having an impact on different species. So the rising sea temperatures that are caused by climate change may actually affect the future distribution of white-beaked in our waters, because the shores of the UK are the southern limit of the white-beaked distribution. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on and try and learn as much as we can about. So places like Trumpet Head on the Isle of Lewis are good locations to see them. Again, I've only been there once, and I saw nothing, but it's one of my favorite places because I do know a lot of people see species from Trumpet Head. Or potentially going to Harris as well. There's a bit of a red spot around that area as well. Or if you want to try further south, you've got Barra. There's a spattering of sightings that we've had around there as well. So, oh, that video didn't play. Come on. So looking, is that? Looking at their behavior, you can see them in groups of say 5 up to 20. They are quite powerful swimmers and they're quite active, and they can bow ride, as you can see in this video. They do have quite a varied diet as well, so they can feed on things like schooling fish, like sand eels and herring, to larger fish such as cod and haddock. and they'll generally work together when they're feeding. So they'll use whistles and tail slaps, like we talked about earlier with the tail slaps, and also leaps, so jumping out of the water to coordinate their hunts. And they can also sometimes be seen associating with feeding minke whales and humpbacks. So having that information is really good as well, because potentially if there's feeding white beaks around, there may well be feeding minke whales around and vice versa. Okay, any thoughts on what this species might be? So we've got an adult one in the back and then a calf in the front. Nice. Okay, so Shona said bottlenose dolphin. Fantastic. Yes. So this is a bottlenose. So the bottlenose dolphin is one of the ones that I kind of have a soft spot for, mostly because my previous job was all about bottlenose dolphins. So these are the largest bottlenose dolphins that we see in Scotland, are the largest ones in the world. They can grow up to about 4 meters in size. So they're really chunky animals, and that is because of the temperature of our seas. We've got really cold seas, so they need that extra blubber to keep themselves warm and toasty. They are quite dark animals as well, so they're a really dark grey with a lighter kind of grey white belly underneath. And they, like I say, they're quite big, quite stocky, and their dorsal fins some generally are covered in markings, in potential bites or scratches. And this is because they are quite boisterous animals, and they will bite and scratch one another with their sharp teeth. So these are one of the animals that we actually track through photo ID. So we get photographic pictures of their dorsal fins, and we can use the markings on their dorsal fins to identify the individual animals in the pod. They've got quite a prominent, again, dorsal fin in the middle of their back, nicely curved, and like I say, will get covered in different nicks and scratches throughout their lifetime. You can see from the surfacing profile that they're quite acrobatic and jump around quite a bit as well, similar to the common dolphins. And these are, I've had to include different maps for this because the Solarian map, heat map that we have, we don't encounter bottlenose dolphins as often as we do other species because we're not always in coastal areas. So bottlenose dolphins are generally seen in more coastal areas, so we don't always encounter them as regularly. So you can see here we've got a community sightings map where a lot more of the sightings that come in are from members of the public, because you can normally watch these animals from land. You don't usually need to go out on a boat necessarily to see them because they are closer to shore. Through this, but also through the photo ID, we know that there are two populations in the Hebrides. There are a population around Barra that have been nicknamed the Barra boys, even though they're not necessarily all boys. And there's about 12 in that population. And then there's a separate population in the Hebrides of about 30 to 40. So you'll also see them around like Kintyre Way quite a lot as well. So places like South Uist or Barra would be a good place to go and try and see the Barra boys, or around the Isle of Mull, like you saw from that community sightings map. The Isle of Mull had lots of sightings of bottlenose dolphins, and then there were also a few around the Kintyre Way as well. So you'll usually see them in groups of anything from about 3 to 10 or 12, depending on how many are in that population, as I said already. Sometimes we had footage come through the other week of almost 30, so potentially that was the majority of the Inner Hebrides pod that was being recorded. They're quite inquisitive animals. They will come and check out the boats. They will bow ride on the boats as well. So whenever you are on a boat and you are watching large pods of dolphins, like I say, have a look to see whether it's common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, or even potentially the white-beaked. They can hold their breath for up to 12 minutes, so that is another good thing to be aware of if you're watching them, knowing how long they could potentially stay under the water before they come to the surface. Okay, what about this species? So it's still a dolphin species. All the scars and markings on its back kind of give away which species this one is. Brilliant. Well done. Yes, Rizzo's. Excellent. A few people's favorite dolphin. They are wonderfully different to look at, so I do enjoy this species. These are a similar size to the bottlenose, so they can grow to just under 4 meters in size. And they are also quite dark in color and have that robust, stocky sort of body shape as well. The calves, interestingly, are actually born quite grey, and they turn a darker grey to a kind of a dark brown color as they age into juveniles. But then as they get older, their skin lightens again to kind of like a silvery grey, and then they actually get covered in scratches and scars. And these are inflicted by other Rizzos, but also by their prey of choice, which is squid. So the squid will have the barbs on the end of their tentacles, and they'll be scratching at the dolphin, trying not to be fed. And they will then get covered in all of these scars. And you'll see from that first picture here, sometimes the oldest ones are actually so covered in scars that they actually look completely white. So they're a really interesting animal to watch. These ones are the ones that I said look like they've swam into a brick wall, and they've got a flat face, so they have no beak to them, and they've got that nice big mouth to the side as well. Sometimes look like they're smiling. Generally, again, you see these ones in deeper waters, but sometimes they'll be coastal. I have seen them from land, but most of the time I've seen them when I've been on a vessel. So they are one to kind of look out for. So I've got a question, why are they called Rizzo's dolphins? That's a really good question. So I've always been told I have to make sure that when I write Rizzo's, I write it with a capital. So it's because it's someone's name, I believe. I'd have to confirm that, but I believe it was someone's name, so potentially someone that actually identified them. So I will check that and yeah, make sure that that's the right answer, but I believe that is why. So they're kind of sightings wise scattered around the Hebrides. There's not really one location that I would sort of send you to. I've got a few sort of suggestions, but they are generally seen sort of scattered around the Hebrides, like I say, normally in deeper waters. The north of Scotland does represent their northernmost limit for this species, so you generally won't see them further north than in Scotland. So places like Cape Wrath might potentially be a good spot for them. Trumping Head again on the Isle of Lewis or on the Isle of Harris. And oh, that was my last suggestion. Sorry, I didn't realize I only had 3 for that one. So for this animal, you could see them up to group sizes of about 20. And usually you won't see them necessarily associating with boats that often. So they will display behaviours such as breaching and tail slapping and even spy hopping as well. But they generally won't interact or bow ride with boats. So you can see from this video, that one looks very, very white in its coloration. These also sometimes get confused with killer whales, so I am going to move on to them next, but I wanted to bring that up. So sometimes from a distance, the dorsal fin on the Rizzos does get confused with the female's dorsal fin of a killer whale, and I'll explain that a bit more in just a second. Okay, so I won't ask because I've just said that these ones are the killer whales, and everyone knows these ones are killer whales. So these are the largest member of the dolphin family. So their size, their coloration, and also their behavior make them very distinctive. So they're usually quite easy to identify. They've got that lovely eye patch on their face, which is just above where their actual eye sits. And they've got that beautiful saddle patch, which is the marking behind their dorsal fin as well. Adult killer whales can grow up to 10 meters in size. So they are very, very large animals. Generally, females are smaller and longer lived than the males. So the dorsal fins on their backs, the males can have dorsal fins that are up to 1.8 meters in size, so they are huge. And the females are generally smaller than the males. So like I say, generally the females can look, the dorsal fin can look similar to kind of the Rizzo's dorsal fin, which is why people get them sometimes mixed up from a distance. So in Scotland, we have different types of killer whales. So occasionally we get visits from the Northern Isles community. They're often seen around Shetland, but they are sometimes seen in the Hebrides around the West Coast. But we also have a community called the West Coast community on the West Coast. And these are quite different to the Northern Isles. So you can see here that the Northern Isles are type A, so they're classed as type A killer whales. They've got more of a straight line between like their eye patch and their tail, whereas the type B, which is the West Coast community, have more of a slanted, so slant from their eye patch down to their bellies, and they look chunkier as well. So type B orcas will primarily feed on marine mammals such as seals and porpoise, occasionally minke whales as well, and that does make them unfortunately threatened by high contaminants because they're the top of the food chain. So they're taking on all the contaminants from other species that they're feeding on. And then you've got things like the type 1, the type A, which are feeding on things more like fish. So is their name killer? Well deserved. Why not orca? Good question. I think it is definitely an area of debate around what they should be called. So they were called killer whales, I believe, because when they were first discovered, they were seen to kill other whales. So they got the name that they got the name killer whale. They are the largest dolphins. They're not necessarily a whale. But yeah, that's kind of where they got their name from. And then yeah, you've also got the name orca from them. So here at Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust, we do use the name killer whale just because that is generally what is used in scientific papers. So it's quite hard again to kind of tell you where to go to see the West Coast community in particular, because from this map you can see that they are quite they travel around quite a bit from what we've been seeing in the previous few years. So this goes up to 2021, this map in the middle here. And in recent years, they've started traveling further around and exploring different areas. So they are, they can be seen all year round on the West Coast, but they will travel to different places. So they've been seen down in England, they've been seen on the southeast of England, they've also been seen around Ireland. So last year they kind of did a tour of the UK and just turned up in loads of different places that they hadn't been confirmed to have traveled to before. And this year again, they spent some time in Ireland at the end of March, and then they were back on the West Coast in April, and we're seeing quite a fair bit for a couple of weeks in April. So they can travel quite at speed, 35 miles per hour if they want to, so they can get from Skye to Mull in just one night. So Nice Point is one place that I've seen a few sighting reports come through for the killer whales, and also from Ardnamurchan as well. I realised the time, I've got one more species and then we'll move on to the ID quiz. I'm very sorry, we've overrun a little bit. So this is our last cetacean species. Anyone remember what I said this one would be that we would talk about, the baleen whale? Perfect, thank you. Yes, the minke. So this is the Minke Whale. Again, one of my favourite whales. It is one of the most regularly seen whales as well in Scotland, but it's also the smallest whale that we see. So it can grow up to 10 meters in size and weigh similar weight to an African elephant. So it's pretty impressive, even though it is classed as our smallest whale. So generally you'll see these in summer months. So these are classed as migratory species. They'll come to visit us in the summer months, but we have again had a few sighting reports of them in the winter as well. I believe our first sighting report this year was actually in February. They are coastal, so again, you'll see these from land. I had brilliant sightings of them just the other day from land, but you can also see them on a boat. If you are on a boat watching them, listen out for them. One thing, because you might hear their blow, but another thing to really be aware of is how they smell. So if you're ever on a boat and you start smelling something really stinky and it smells like fish, potentially you're smelling a minke whale. So have a look around you, because you could end up seeing it as well as smelling it. So their nickname is Stinky Minky because they have such bad fish breath. So that's something to be aware of whenever you're on a boat to help you potentially spot them. They're quite a dark grey colour on their back. So you can kind of see here that they've got a lovely long grey back, and then it goes into their dorsal fin. So for a whale, the dorsal fin, like I said earlier, is closer to the tail generally. And then they've got a lovely kind of white belly, and they're called minky mittens on their pectoral fins. And we believe these minky mittens is a part of their hunting technique. They'll be swimming along. The fish will think that there's two predators coming at them from different directions, and then they'll get into a tight ball to protect themselves. And actually, they've just made it a lot easier for this baleen whale to open its mouth wide and then take a big gulp of fish for their food. So like I say, they are very commonly seen, the most commonly seen whale that we have. So they are distributed quite nicely around the West Coast. We generally, in the UK, each year, about 11,000 minke whales actually come northward from their warmer wintering grounds, which is thought to be off the northwest coast of Africa. But again, this is something we're still learning. They are another species that we do photo ID for, to try and learn where it is they're going when they're not in the Hebrides, when they're not around the West Coast. So again, places, similar places, I am saying again, it's clearly showing I've got a bias to some of these places, but Trumping Head on the Isle of Lewis, around Skye as well. Isle of Egg also has a really good sort of area there. It's got a nice big red blob around it. And then also places like the Isle of Cole, you could potentially see them as well. But these are another animal where I would just say, if you're near the sea, keep an eye out for them, because they could potentially be around. So ways to help you spot a minke whale. Generally, you'll see them normally kind of on their own. But you may see them, you may see more than one individual. So I've seen 3 individuals actually traveling together before. Potentially, I'm not sure, it may have been a juvenile with them, but there were definitely 3 minke whales traveling together. That's the first time and the only time I've actually seen that. And then I've also had minke whales set in completely different areas, but in the same area, like in the same site from what I'm watching, but not associating with each other. They will sometimes associate with boats, so they can actually be quite curious sometimes. They're not an animal I never used to say that, but on the West Coast, I've been seeing a lot of reports where they actually do kind of associate with the boat a little bit and show a bit of interest. They're also generally not one that will, I say generally not one that will breach out of the water, but again, I've had a few reports coming through of people seeing them breaching, and sometimes when they breach, they breach several times as well, which is just incredible. Their diving pattern. So again, this is an animal where if you've seen it once and then it disappears, it can be quite hard to actually find it again. So especially on boats, I generally struggle to find a minke whale again. But if you're looking from land, they are ones that can travel at speed again, so up to 13 miles an hour. So they may not be anywhere near the position you first spotted them. So just look around the area and look kind of further afield as well for them. Their diving sequence is kind of 5 to 8 blows. You don't always necessarily see the blows, but they come up and kind of breathe 5 to 8 times basically. And then they can dive for between 3 to 8 minutes. So generally their sort of diving sequence is about 3 to 8 minutes. So just keep looking around for up to about 10 minutes and see if they surface again. Right, so just before we go on to the species quiz, and hopefully we won't run over too much more, some ways, especially if you're on a boat, and just for you to be aware of, things that you should do is not approach them from the front or from behind. You should approach them more kind of from the side. And generally, I would normally say don't approach them, let them approach you as well. But slow down your speed. Assess the situation, so kind of work out what species it is for one thing. Some species don't really like associating or interacting with boats. Things like porpoise, you'll get a better sighting of those if you actually stay a distance away from them. You should stay at least 100 meters away, more if you can, really. If there's things like calves around, or they are clearly feeding, you should really be at least 400 meters away. So being able to assess the behaviors that you're seeing and how close you should, you know, sort of be to watch them will help you get that better encounter, because you shouldn't then scare them away or interfere with the behaviors that they're displaying. Allow them to control the interaction, the encounter that you have. Keep your engine in neutral and limit your time with them to 15 minutes. Now, some species, such as dolphins, may actually try and stick around for longer, especially if they are bowel riding. I know a few boat operators have kind of said they won't actually leave us. How do we get rid of them, sort of thing. So slowing down your boat, not stopping, but you're gradually slowing your boat down, so that they get bored, basically, because they can no longer kind of play on the waves, is a good way to letting them know that they need to leave, because you've potentially spent too long with them. But if you are in a boat and they are bowel riding, make sure that you're predictable, so that they know kind of what your speed is, what your course is, and they won't get harmed because they can predict what you're going to do. And also be aware of how many other boats are in the area. So this picture is definitely something we don't want to be seeing. There's far too many boats there. They've completely surrounded the animals. The animals are huddling together, clearly unhappy. So if there are if there's 2 boats already, then there shouldn't be any more. So 3 boats is basically too many, so don't crowd them, and give them room to leave as well. The other thing also to be aware of, if you are a boat operator, or if you have your own boat, or if you go on to a wildlife watch, is just to be aware of potentially what's happened before you've been there, because even though you're following all of the guidance and you're not disturbing them, something may have happened just before you got there, and then you being there as well has just kind of added to that pressure on that animal. Just a wee video that I like to show people. So this is just showing kind of how you should approach. The one thing I will comment on this video though is, again, try not to push them into the coast. So try not to basically encourage them closer to the shore, because yeah, we don't want them to risk getting too close to land. So slow down, never get between mothers and calves as well. Like I say, you should really keep your distance if there's any calves around. Allow them to leave, and don't approach more than 100 meters. Oh, no worries, Colin. Thank you so much for coming. We're just going to go on to the species quiz now, and then we'll be done. But thanks so much. Okay, so I realise we have run over. I'm very, very sorry. This should only take 5 minutes. If you'd like to stay for the wee species quiz, and then we'll finish up and go for any other questions that we might have, which hopefully I'll be able to answer. So yeah, feel free at this point, if you want to turn your microphone on and shout out the answers, or if you'd prefer to just put it in the chat, you're welcome to. So there will also, just to let you know, there will be species here that I haven't covered. So I might have thrown in a few little challenging ones, but hopefully I'm sure you'll get them there. I'm sure you'll get them. So let's see. Let's play. Oh, yeah. Okay, so what do we think this species might be? Looking at the coloration on the body, their behavior, the shape. Oh, brilliant. Yes. Oh, look at that, you've all got it, Minky. They've clearly got those minky mittens on their pectoral fins. And this one looks quite intrigued by the boat actually as well. But those minky mittens are definitely making a good appearance there. And the way they're surfacing. Excellent. Next one. Oh, I think this one's just a picture. So what do we think this one is of this animal? This is just a picture of it surfacing. So checking out the dorsal fin on its back, shape of it. Oh, brilliant. Look at that. Fantastic. Yes, well done. Absolutely right. Harbour porpoise, well done. So nice kind of grey colour. And then you've got that lovely triangular dorsal fin on its back. And then we've got another video here. Oh, what about these guys? Quite acrobatic. Very short clip, but hopefully you managed to work out what they were. Do I need to play it again? There we go. These were one of the species that I said are quite
common dolphin.
Oh, okay. So we've had someone call out common dolphin. We've got a few bottlenose in the chat. So these ones are bottlenose dolphins. So these animals are quite stocky, quite chunky. They're that dark grey colour. You can't always tell very well from that video, but they will also jump out of the water and generally play around like that as well. And this one I didn't talk about. Well, I kind of mentioned it, but we didn't actually cover this one fully. Does anyone know what this one? Brilliant. Yes, Jane. Well done. So this one you can kind of tell from the shape of its dorsal fin. It's kind of more like a little stumpy thing on its back. It's not like a really prominent dorsal fin on its back. So this one is a humpback whale. That's the one of the ones I threw in that I didn't cover. I'll mute that as well. What about this one? Or this one it's a better video to be able to ID these ones. You can kind of see more of their body shape. You could you can see their beak in this one as well, and the shape of their dorsal fin. So we have had this one already. Any thoughts for that one? I'll put it back, play it again. Yeah, they are dolphins. So they're grey. You can kind of see a few scratches all over their dorsal fins there. They've got kind of a short bottle-shaped beak.
Beaked.
Oh, so these ones are bottlenose dolphins again. So they've got that really kind of dark grey body. There's no white patches all over them. They've got a few markings on their dorsal fin, and you can kind of see the shape of their bottle-shaped beak there as well. Sorry, Jane. I did mention the beaks. I didn't say they were white though. And what about this one? Again, it's not a video. This one's just a picture. So look at the long back that it has. Look at the kind of dorsal fin, which is closer to the tail than it is in the middle. Very good, Joanne. Yes, you're the first one to come in there with your thoughts, so well done. It is a Minke Whale, yes. Oh, put someone in the waiting room. There we go. Okay, I've thrown this one in. We clearly didn't cover seals, but let's see if anyone knows. So we've got Jane and Jan saying grey seal. Yeah, brilliant. It is a grey seal, fantastic. So grey seals generally have more of a Roman, they kind of describe it as a Roman shaped nose, whereas commons kind of have a bit more of a forehead, kind of more kind of cat shaped face, and grey seals I describe as having more of a dog shaped face. Also greys have more of this splodgy kind of patterning on their bodies. This one's a video, didn't cover this species either, but hopefully not a whale or a dolphin, if that helps. I mentioned it when I was talking about behaviors. Oh, well, we've already got some guesses in there. Fantastic. Sorry. Yes. So we've got a few people saying basking shark. Well done. So for basking sharks, yeah, you'll generally see that dorsal fin in the middle of its back. If it's calm enough waters, you'll see the tail, which is just poking out there. And then sometimes you'll see its nose poking out as well. So if you see kind of 3 triangles swimming along the water, it's probably a basking shark, because they'll just be swimming along with their mouths open, filtering for food. What about these ones? This is just a picture. There's no video for this one. So having a look again at that beak shape. I'm helping, I'm trying to help, honest. So look at the beak shape, look at the shape of the dorsal fin, quite prominent, quite pointy. And it's also got a kind of coloration on the side of its body there as well. So we've got a guess for common dolphins. Oh, here we go. We've got more guesses coming through of common. Fantastic. Yes. Perfect. So this one is common dolphin. So again, quite a large group size as well. Really long beak on it. Nice prominent tall dorsal fin, middle of its back. And then it's got that kind of yellowy, creamy coloration on the side of its body there. And we've got a video. Let's mute that. We've got a nice video here. Let's see. Hopefully this one won't be too challenging. So just seeing the body coming out. There was some white on the front of that body when we just saw it come out. Oh, now look at the shape of its face of the, I'll just go back to that bit that really kind of gave you a hint there. So look at the shape of that face there. It hasn't really got much of a beak. It's kind of more of a flattened head. Ah, brilliant. Yes, there we go.
Yes, yes.
Some Rizzos. Yeah, so it's got kind of that flat face. It's got a white coloration on its body from the scars, but it's got quite a prominent dorsal fin in the middle of its back, which can, like I mentioned earlier, get confused with female orca sometimes. Fantastic. Another one that I haven't mentioned, but it's a wee seal. Any ideas what this seal might be? Thinking of what I briefly mentioned earlier about the shape of the head.
Grey seal.
Oh, so okay, we've got a few in the chat. So yeah, earlier's one was grey seal because it had that more Roman shaped nose. This one's got a little bit more of kind of an indent on its head there. Kind of big wide eyes as well. So this one is a common seal. And let's turn the volume off that. Similar video to what I showed you when we talked about these animals. What do we think for this species? They've got that rolling motion on the surface of the water, a little bit like tires rolling in the water. Oh, let's go. See if we can get them again. There they are. And that short triangular dorsal fin. Brilliant. Yes, well done, everyone. They are harbour porpoise. Excellent. And this one's just a picture. So this is a couple of triangles sticking out of the water, kind of like a small triangle and then a larger triangle in the middle and then a pointier triangle at the back there. And then it looks like there might be 2 actually swimming nose to tail. Excellent. Yes. So this is a basking shark. So this behavior would be what we think is courtship behavior. So this would be quite an interesting behavior to record if you were ever to see this. Excellent. I think we've got 2 more after this, hopefully. I think I added more than I realized. Any thoughts for what this one is? So this animal, you can clearly see that coloration on the side of its body and a bit behind the back of its quite dark, prominent dorsal fin. You can't quite see its beak. That's definitely a hint this time. Let's see. Fantastic. Yes. So this one is a white-beaked dolphin. So it's got that dark, prominent dorsal fin in the middle of its back. But it's got that lovely white coloration on the side of its body and also behind its dorsal fin as well. Oh, I lied. I must have one. I've got one more at least after this. If not, I'll skip it. Video here. Let's see. They need to come out of the water again. What have we got? Here we go. So we've got quite a number of animals. There was a coloration on the side of their body. They're swimming quite fast, interacting quite a lot with the boat.
Comment.
See if they come up again.
Mm.
No, I'll just pop it back there, see what we've got in the chat. Yeah, okay. So yeah, these ones are common dolphins. If I go back here, you can see that they've got the kind of lighter coloration on the front of their bodies there, kind of like that hourglass shape. They've got quite a slim body shape as well, and they're interacting with the boat and swimming around quite fast as well. Okay, I am going to skip this one just because we are running out of time, and I'll go with the last one here. Let's see. So we've got that footprint in the water, so we know something has just went under the water, and we've got this animal coming out, clearly feeding. We must know what this one is. I can play it again. That footprint in the water. Brilliant, yes. Killer whale or orca, fantastic. Quite a prominent dark dorsal fin. That saddle patch on the back of its dorsal fin really gives it away that that one is an orca or a killer whale. That one is feeding. It looks like it has recently done a kill. You can kind of see, there we go. It's just come up from the water there and taken a bit of food. Don't know what it is feeding on, but it potentially was a, let's see, potentially some form of mammal. But yeah, that one was recorded feeding. Excellent footage. Oh, actually, I've got in my notes here, that's helpful, because this is someone else's video. Apparently it's a porpoise it was feeding on. So, right, so sorry, I cannot believe I ran over that much. I did practice this and it was definitely an hour. So thank you so much for coming. The last couple of slides is just things that you can do to help. So you can help by reporting any sightings that you have or submitting photos, and you can keep up to date with kind of what's been seen through Whale Track. So again, you can go onto the website and have a look at any sightings, and you can also download the app as well to be able to record your sightings. So I really hope that what we've covered is going to help you when you're going out looking for wildlife. One, with knowing kind of locations to go, things to look out for, knowing that there might potentially be something around, and then also working out what it is you've seen and having that good interaction with them, both for yourself and for them. So we do have a few questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to